The study of how individual customers, groups or organizations select, buy, use, dispose ideas and goods. This is all about the consumer behavior. Represents all the bundles which will cost the consumer her entire income. So the entire income is being placed into the budget. Within her income, what she can buy, that's where the budget line comes. Now budget set is collection of all bundles when we talk about that budget line factor, and then the bundle to that income capacity is your budget set. Good morning and welcome to the revision class for Chapter 2 in Microeconomics, that is Theory of Consumer Behavior. This is a very important chapter in the second PUC Economics, and we are going to see what is this chapter all about. So going forward, let's try to meet the agenda today. We're going to have the chapter introduction, the weightage, types of questions and the question and answers. So this is going to be a very interesting and an important session for you because you are going to determine how you're going to score in the coming examination. Now let's going further. Look at the weightage of marks. I'm really baffled with the amount of marks that you can score from this chapter. You have a 1-mark question, so that's the first mark that you will be taking up. 2 2-marks question, so that's a 4-mark, 1 plus 4, 5. Then 1 4-mark question, another 4 marks coming up, that makes the total to 9. 1 6-mark question, so that makes the total to 15. And another 5-mark question, so that makes the total reach 20 marks. 20 marks coming in from one chapter. Look at that. It's about the clear calculation here. 9 plus 6, 15, 15 plus 5, 20 marks. Just look at the major chunk of marks that you can score from one chapter. Yesterday we were discussing about the first chapter, the introduction to microeconomics. Today we are looking here at the second chapter. It is about the theory of consumer behavior. The first chapter you can score 6 marks, and in the second chapter you can score 20 marks. So just by studying 2 chapters in second PUC economics, you can take 26 marks. That is 1/4 of the paper already taken. So that's why I say this subject is very easy. You just have to focus chapter wise and you will be able to score maximum marks here. So just going forward, let's try to understand what is this study all about, the theory of consumer behavior. The study of how individual customers, groups or organizations select, buy, use, dispose ideas and goods. This is all about the consumer behavior. Now it refers to the consumer's action in the marketplace and the motivations behind it. Now all of us know that a consumer is a bundle of expectation. He's actually a set of expectations, and that keeps running across all over the place. Many times what happens to this great consumer is that he starts thinking, he starts worrying about this factor. How am I going to take it forward? What is going to be in for me? How should I do it? How should I not do it? So there's a whole lot of actions and reactions that keep coming forth and back in his mindset altogether. So what now happens here is that this would start getting into a scenario, this would start getting into a factor altogether where you would be worried about it, where you would start thinking, how am I going to take it forward? So the consumer behavior is all about the patterns, the analysis of how he buys, what he buys, at what budget, at what price. So it is all about the consumer, it is all about you and me. So in general, consumer behavior is the first step in economics where you will go ahead and understand the pattern, the needs and wants of the consumer. So this is a very interesting chapter, and this will actually go further in terms of understanding the bigger concepts in economics. Followed by, let's try to go in for some of the summary here of the chapter. These are the key takeaways which I would like to say from the chapter. The budget set, the budget line, preference, indifference curve, rate of substitution, monotonic, diminishing rate of substitution, indifference map, and the utility function. Let's try to understand each one of them now. The budget set, it is a set. That means to say that you have a particular amount that is being kept, and that is how you would like to take the budget set altogether. It's a fixed price in your mind, a fixed set of amount that you have kept. A budget line is going to be a combination of all budget set put together. Preferences, what are the preferences of the consumer that you're talking about, followed by the indifference curve. Now, this is a very important concept. The indifference curve tells you very clearly, higher the price, the consumer becomes completely indifferent to the pricing because he likes the product. Rate at which you substitute a product. Monotonic preferences, where you are talking only about one single commodity again and again because you like it, followed by the diminishing rate of return. As you consume more and more, the rate of utilization comes down, and the indifference map, which is connected to the indifference curve. Finally, the utility function, which talks about the want satisfying capacity. Moving further, let's also talk about the consumer's optimum demand. What is the level at which a consumer will look for a demand function altogether? Followed by the law of demand, which is also very, very interesting for all of us to see, because law of demand tells exactly how things work on. The demand curve altogether, which is also very important for all of us, because the demand curve will speak about the law of demand and the factors, and followed by the substitution effect and income effect. So how does a consumer substitute one over the other? The income effect on the consumer. Normal goods, where you see that the price of the good rises as the income rises. Inferior good, opposite to normal good, when the prices deteriorate in spite of income rising, followed by substitute, when you substitute one product, when you replace one over the other. Complement, which go hand in hand with that same product, and the price elasticity, which talks about the flexibility or the range of price, the change in price to the change in the good factor altogether. Now, let's go on further and try to do the exam corner questions. Some of these questions have been repeated again and again in the exam, so that's why I've taken those questions. These questions are bound to come in your examination, so please pay attention so that you will be able to score the entire 20 marks out of this chapter. Starting with what is budget line, what is utility, MRS, what is demand, and what do you mean by marginal utility. So let's try answering each one of them. What is a budget line? A budget line represents all the bundles which cost the consumer her entire income. Look at the line here very, very clearly. Represents all the bundles which will cost the consumer her entire income. So the entire income is being placed into the budget. Within her income, what she can buy, that's where the budget line comes. Now, when we talk about utility, just this 3 words is more than enough for you to score the mark. Want satisfying capacity. So whenever people ask you this question, what is utility, you just have to say want satisfying capacity, followed by what is marginal rate of substitution. That's what MRS stands for. So whenever people ask you this question, what is MRS, that means to say marginal rate of substitution, followed by what is the price at which. Now, for example, when I ask this question, what is demand all about? So consumer is willing to pay a price at a given value altogether. For the exact thing that we need to understand here is that consumer is willing to pay a price for the given product. That is exactly how demand is created. What do you mean by the marginal utility? Additional utility that is derived by consuming one extra unit. So whenever people talk about marginal, that means one additional or the extra unit that has been consumed. Now let's go on to the 2-mark questions, which is getting interesting now. Now let's talk about what do you mean by budget line, budget set, monotonic, law of demand, and elasticity of demand. Before we go to the answers, I would always say that question number 2, question number 3 is very, very important because they have been repeated. And of course, there are some times where I ask you to distinguish between a budget line and budget set, but I would definitely say monotonic preference, law of demand has always been there, and not to forget the state the price of elasticity of demand. So we are going to concentrate on these questions as of right now. Let's go further. So what is the budget set and budget line? Now, budget set is collection of all bundles when we talk about that budget line factor, and then the bundle to that income capacity is your budget set. So whenever I say a line is a collection, and whenever I say a set, that's about your income capacity. Now, what does the factor when we talk about this word called as monotonic preferences? Same taste and choice does not change. Many a times what happens as a consumer, you need to understand that I will not be changing my preferences too many times. Why? Because I like it. Even though the price might be great, there are options available, but as a consumer, my preference, my choice and taste remains the same. So that's where I tend to become on a monotonic preference altogether. Followed by the price and quantity are what is the factor that we are talking about is the law of demand. So when I talk about the law of demand, what is it? As the law of demand states very clearly, everything, other things remaining same. When we talk about the law of demand, it is about the price and quantity. They are inversely proportional. If the price increases, the quantity of goods demanded will come down. And it's an inverse relation, which means if the price decreases, the quantity of demand goods will start going up. So price and quantity are inversely proportional. This is the key word that you need to keep in your mind. Next one, we are talking about price versus the demand function. This is the law of price of quantity of demand. So we know that it's about the change in price for the good divided by the quantity of the goods that is demanded altogether. So this is very, very important when we talk about the price elasticity factor. Moving further, the 4-mark questions: explain budget set with a diagram, explain the indifference map, they explain the differences between normal goods and the inferior goods. So let's go with that. We know about the budget set. You're going to write about the collection of all bundles with a small diagram coming up there. Next, when we talk about the indifference, you need to draw the indifference map. Most of you know this will be the indifference map, which you will start getting like this, 3 indifference curves. Based on that, you have to explain the factors. Because this is a 4 marks, please keep in mind you need to write 12 lines to score that 4 marks. When you are writing a 4-marker in economics, it is mandatory for you that if there is a diagram or there is a graph or there are anything related to the answer, please highlight those key points when you are writing. It is not just enough, sir, I have written some 5 or 6 lines, will they give me full marks? No, definitely not. So whenever you are trying to answer a question like indifference map or a collection budget set or budget lines, please do draw the relevant diagram with respect to that particular question so that you are able to score your full marks. And then when we talk about normal goods and the inferior goods, you know the factor. Normal goods means price increases with the income. Inferior goods, it's the reverse function altogether. I would always give a piece of advice to my students here. Whenever you get a chance to write questions, the answers for questions in a 4-marker, try to attempt those questions which will have a graph or which will have a tabular column or which will have something extra to write over the theoretical answers. The reason is that that will highlight your understanding, your conceptual understanding to the person who is correcting your paper so that you will be able to score better. Now, when you write a question like this, normal goods versus inferior goods, it's quite easy. Why? Because most of the students would just write the theory and move further, but then the scoring pattern becomes difficult because everybody would have done the same thing. On the other hand, when you look into a question like indifference map, you will get 2 or 3 maps. You can label it neatly, you can write down, explain it, so you will get some space to write also. That would make the examiner understand that you have done better than the others. So always go in for questions like this, which will help you to score better. Moving further, let's look into the 6-mark. One of the 6-mark question which I've always felt that has come from this particular chapter is explain the law of diminishing marginal utility. Now let's first try to understand the question, diminishing marginal utility. So how are you going to plan your answer? You're going to give an explanation, a basic introduction of what is the utility concept, followed by marginal utility, then the consumption factor, how it increases with the fallen unit, and then finally it starts decreasing altogether. So you're going to put all those factors here. Initially it increases and then it starts decreasing. Now there are three parts to this question. The first part is the introduction factor. So you have to introduce, tell people clearly that what it is. What is the utility concept? Define utility. Then you say how marginal utility comes into picture. Why marginal utility? Because initially when you start consuming more and more, you are interested. You feel that yes, I would like to have more and more. But then over a point of time, you are not able to consume. Now to give you a very simple example, first time when you have 1 cup of ice cream, yes, that excites you. The second, probably yes. Third, yes, I'm trying to. But from the 4th cup, the interest or the liking towards ice cream would start coming downwards. Now that's exactly diminishing marginal. So every extra unit you start consuming, the consumption level will start coming down. So that's where we are saying that the diminishing marginal utility into picture. So I would always say that try to bring in examples like this. Why? Because when you write with example and with the graph for the diminishing marginal utility factor, the entire answer will also look neat and it will be very cohesive in nature. That will help you to score this entire 6 marks here. Now, this is what I would also say. With this, I would also say that there is another thing that we need to talk about is the practical oriented question, which will come for 5 marks. Let me tell you what is a practical oriented question. A practical oriented question is more about understanding the skills that you have acquired from this particular chapter. So it might be about the utility function, it might be about marginal utility, it might be about demand. So no need to worry about it. This 5 marks is very easy to score. They will ask you very simple questions trying to make you understand about utility or about the demand. All you have to do is write 5 points and you get that 5 marks there. This is a practical oriented question. So this is called as POQ. This is a part of it. There are 2 questions like this. It will come in the exam. So 10 marks you can score here. Now from this chapter, we will get only 1 question. So please work hard so that you will be able to score this 5 marks from this particular chapter. With this, I come to the end of this particular session. I hope and believe that all the facts and figures that we have spoken in this particular session will be of great use and benefit to you, and this would also help you to score better in the examination. Now, in the upcoming sessions, we are going to talk about production and cost, which is the 3rd chapter in microeconomics. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.